Welcome to Off the Record News. I'm your host, Diana Longry. Thank you for tuning in. Off the Record News is brought to you weekly with news that we hope that you will find interesting and maybe will inspire you to be involved and be interested in what is going on in your local municipality or perhaps even in your county. Now, tonight we are going to focus specifically on the Ramsey County Board meeting that was held just, yesterday, June 11th. And also we will have a report on a tour that was a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, of the Purple Line, the Rush Line that's going to decimate the Bruce Vento Trail. So we've got an update on that as well. So I think you're going to find this to be a very fascinating show. Now, to help me with tonight's report is Mr. Greg Copeland, who's been on the show a number of times, but he's actually attended the meeting that we're going to be discussing, and he went on that tour, and so he can tell us a little bit more about what went on there, and actually a little bit about who did attend. So, Mr. Copeland, thank you for being here.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Diana, always to be on your program. I love it.
Well, we hope that our viewers enjoy the content as well. Now, this meeting that you went to, I think you were the only resident of Ramsey County that wasn't an elected official or a staff member that was there, correct?
That's my understanding. Out of 540,000 residents, yeah.
And one of the top items on their agenda was the pay raise for the Ramsey County Commissioners. Now, of course, you would think that this would be something that people of Ramsey County would be very interested in, and certainly people of those municipalities that are already heavily taxed already under their own municipality, you would think that they would be very interested in the pay raises that are going on for the Ramsey County Commissioners. But the Ramsey County Commissioners actually did everything they could to pretty much sweep it under the carpet so that nobody even knew it was going on. So, Mr. Copeland, first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you were made aware and knew that this was going to be on the agenda?
Well, now we're giving away those trade secrets. Anyway, no, folks, what you can do is what I did, and that is you can get on a little notice system that the county has. They'll send you an email of all their meetings that they're going to have with the board, with the rail authority, with their HRA, all these good things that they do down there to earn that big money. We'll tell you about how payday is going. And frankly, if you want to get to some of these meetings, they'll give you their schedule. And that's how I ended up also on the bus trip. That was noticed as a public meeting, which is indeed it was. And even though we were on the bus going through the corridor that will be now called the Purple Line. You know, and of course the Viking thing just came up on that. But the good news is the Vikings are actually over in Minneapolis, and we beat them on that tax issue, and they're never going to forgive us. Tony Bennett and Mr. Trolley Car there, my good friend Rafael Ortega, Commissioner Ortega, you know, they tried to sell us that stadium. Well, now they didn't make that sale, so they're working on the bus. And the bus is good. I ride the bus everywhere. I got my bus pass here. I went to the Union Depot train days, all that stuff. But the real concern is, Diana, going back to the pay raise, is, you know, is every day payday down there? I mean, and who is getting the pay? And here's what they do. They say, well, we're going to pay ourselves at the same rate of pay increase that the county employees are getting. 2.5%. Sounds kind of innocent. In fact, they love to say that because this is the one time that Social Security recipients last year got a bigger pay raise in percentage terms than the county employees. That's the first time I can remember it, because for years, Social Security people got next to nothing or nothing. Now, the reason that percentage thing is a joke, however, is because, as we all know with percentages, it's the base. What is the base number that you're working from? And I'm going to tell you about the pay raise they're getting themselves.
So in other words, what we're drawing the analogy of is that if you are a secretary and you're making $45,000 a year, that's very different than if you are the chair of the Ramsey County Board making nearly $100,000 a year, because I think if I do the math, 2% of $45,000 is a whole lot different than 2% of $100,000.
Well,
now, am I on the right track?
You are on the track that I went down, exactly. And I wore my engineer outfit because I think we got to get Ramsey County and St. Paul and the St. Paul School Board back on track to pick up on your theme. I love it. And the only thing missing tonight are the bibs. Anyway, the point is, folks, that Diana's got it exactly right. Here's an example right off of their website for new hires. These are jobs that they have open. A tax clerk, they want to pay $38,052. The raise that individual would get at 2.5% is $951 and 30 some odd cents. Okay, well, let's compare what that $951 raise is when you look at what a county commissioner is going to get for the 2.5% raise. $2,368. That's their raise. So, all percentages may be equal, but all bases are far from it. Here's an example of a nurse, okay, off their website. They would get a $1,625 increase, again, compared to $2,368. And what, anybody on Social Security get $2,368 pay raise? Come on. The median income in this county, and I'm using the Ramsey County website, and I told them that because, there may be other figures out there, how this goes. But the number, I know I had it here. I got so many numbers, where is it? It was like $5,900, I think. I'm trying to find a doggone number. Anyway, their percentage, here it is, sorry. $57,717 is the median income. So if you take
of a working individual in Ramsey County or of a family?
Well, they talk about family on this one.
Right, and you see, that is a very important distinction, because oftentimes a family is two working people that are working a job that is not enough to live on if they had only one income in that family.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to take that back. On their site, they list the 5717 as an individual. Then there was another number that I found, which was a family of four, 81,585. And of course, they don't divide back to, 57. So thinking of the old-fashioned family, mom and pop and the two kids, the math doesn't work. So I used the 5717 because that was what's on. If you go to Ramsey County's website and you look at a snapshot of Ramsey County, I think they call it.
But it does. But even though, and I think that's fair to say that you're looking at that 57,000, where that is a single individual. But I think it is important to contrast that to what a family income for a family of four is, because that also then shows that we're talking about a family of four. Generally, we're thinking that would be two adults.
Right.
That means one of those adults is being paid less than the other, probably.
A lot less.
And so, like you said, those numbers don't compute.
Well,
it's not double the 57.
Yeah. Well, and if you take the number and compare it directly, let's take the individual number, $717. That's 38 grand, almost 39 grand more. that county commissioners are making.
Right.
Or put another way, probably a better way, $38,841.60
So in
less than the median income.
So in other words, they're making about, let's see.
It's 40%.
Yeah, I was going to say a 40%
Yeah.
more than the average
Bingo.
person in the
County.
county of Ramsey. So here's the way that they announced the agenda item at the meeting. So let's take a look at our first clip and let's see how much, as a resident watching this meeting on the internet, that's where the film footage is, what you can glean from this agenda item. Let's take a look.
Our next item is to approve the proposed Ramsey County Commissioner's salary ordinance for 2020, waiving the second reading.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mas Castillo.
Yes.
McGuire.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Carter.
Yes.
McDonough.
Aye. Our next item is the proposed Ramsey County Commissioner's salary ordinance for 2020. We have a public hearing. We've had one person sign up. If you're here to speak on it, we do have a slip over there. You can sign up and we'll make sure we get everybody who's here to speak on this. I'm going to declare the public hearing for the proposed Ramsey County Commissioner's salary ordinance for 2020 is now open. So the one person who signed up is Greg Copeland. Greg, you want to come up, state your name and your address, and you get 3 minutes.
Now, a couple of observations I want to make before we ask you, Mr. Copeland, more on this. One is that in this agenda item, they don't have any presentation whatsoever about the amount of the proposed increase. So there is absolutely no information for the person who is watching the program to understand what is going to be voted on, other than that it's an increase. So the increase could have been an increase of 0.5%, or it could have been an increase of 10%. Nobody really ever knows. The other thing that I found interesting is that this is an ordinance change, so they have to change the ordinance in order to get this pay raise. Well, what they've done is that they typically have the procedure that there's a first reading of an ordinance change, and that gives everybody of the public to know what the proposed change in the ordinance will be. Then they would call for a second reading, which would be on a different meeting, so that way the public has time for input, so then they can tweak and change that ordinance the way they want. And then after that, that's when they would take the vote. But what they did here is that they waived the second reading, which means that they eliminated the second step. So they went right from the first step to the public hearing step and then to the vote step, pretty much all in one fell swoop. Although they are going to have at the next meeting their final vote. But what is the value of that final vote when they've already bypassed the second reading? Because there's not going to be another opportunity for the public to weigh in. Mr. Copeland.
Well, and you're absolutely right, Diana. Their written agenda, now you can't see too well because it's white on white here, but the reality is there's nothing, I want you to know, viewers, that even if you'd gone to the meeting, there's nothing on this agenda that tells you what numbers they're working on. And it's specifically, even though he said that, but I think he said on the thing about an increase, there's nothing in the language. They just talk about their salary ordinance. And what this is as I said at the opening of my presentation, was the only reason they're having this meeting is because when they formed Ramsey County's charter, and we are the only charter county in Minnesota, they did not set up a formula within the charter that would work over time to set the salary, perhaps gauging it toward the median income or toward population size, and put some sort of a unit figure in there. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways that people can set up the charter so that politicians are not voting to raise their own pay. You could also delay pay raises until after an election. I mean, that's a common practice. So there's a variety of ways, but that's not the way that our charter reads. Now, of course, over the years, and you said, you think there'd be more interest in this topic because of our economic circumstances with taxes going up and whatnot and costs rising. Well, in the past, there's been much discussion at the County Charter Commission on this topic, believe me. And I know in the past that you've gone down and testified and been the lonely testifier in some years on this very same subject. So there doesn't seem to be any political will on the Charter Commission to initiate anything. But I did ask that the county commissioners forward a request to the Charter Commission to take a look at coming up with a formula and frankly to eliminate this business of deciding what they're going to pay. And I'm not saying that they should be frozen at what they have, certainly not. I'm not suggesting any particular formula. I have in the past, but I chose not to at this point because I think frankly there ought to be some discussion. Again, public input, because those charter meetings are public meetings and they've always had lots of people testify.
And here's the other thing that you also saw in that clip is that you're talking about it would be good to have testimony or discussion from the public. Well, there wasn't even any discussion by the commissioners. It was like they'd already talked about it in the back room. And I want to tell everybody, the Ramsey County Commissioners, they are subject to the open meeting law, just like your city council members are. And yet, when you watch the Ramsey County board meetings, you would have to almost come to the conclusion that they have been conducting their business somewhere else and not in front of the cameras. Now, Mr. Copeland has gone to some of their workshops where they maybe have audio, but there again, who's listening to the audio? How available is it for anybody to access? Few people have that ability to be able to pull out that kind of data. That's why it's so important for us to focus in on these types of local issues on our news programs, because we actually can be there and pull this stuff out.
Well, that's absolutely the value of your program, because you're seeing what the public will never see because they're what? At work.
Yes.
They're at school. They're out of town. It's not part of their life. So if they watch your show, they can get more news about local government than they probably will get in some of the so-called newspapers, because they do cover certain stories, but it's one or two. They don't give you that breadth of coverage. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I think that's where public access TV is so important. And I know you've always supported that, and we have some public officials in our metro that, are where we used to work together in Maplewood that certainly have decimated the coverage of their government, the people's government, I should say.
Well, you know what? It's finally coming out, something that has been talked about on these programs about governance being done in secret. And that's a little bit off the topic here, but there was just a recent interview with the governor where he says that they have to do their government activities in secret, otherwise they won't get anything done. And we are actually in the process of getting that raw data so that we can bring that to our viewers so they can actually see it and hear it for themselves. It was reported on by a reporter who was doing the interview that got that quote from the governor.
Well,
and it's very evident not only in the people that he has selected for his top people of his various departments, whether or not if it's Nora Slawick, or whether or not if it's Paul Schnell, or any number of other people that he has selected to be his top in command. That is the environment that they come from, that is the environment they support, and that is the environment he supports. And unfortunately, it trickles down, and it trickles down to our Ramsey County Board, where we've got secret government behind the doors. It comes down to our municipalities, and that's why we really have to watch and see everything that they're doing, because they're not going to share it with us otherwise.
No, and the governor, I heard an interview also, perhaps it was related to the one that you're talking about, in terms of the special session that he's thinking about having. And he said, well, we have to get the right people at the table. The right people at the table. Well, excuse me, but who are the right people? There's a...
And who decides who those right people are?
And how do we ever even get to that? Because a special session of the legislature is a convening of our, 67 senators, and our 32 or 4 rather, members of the House. So, they all have election certificates. It's the same election certificate. The only change is what? In the office and in the term. But these people are elected to do the people's business. They're not elected to say to the governor, well, you know what? You do such a great job with Mr. Gazelka and with that lady Hortman. She's such a wonderful speaker. You just go take care of business. We'll go play golf. And actually, the legislators aren't playing golf. The legislators are incredibly frustrated. But I've yet to hear one legislator stand up and hold up their election certificate and say to the governor and the public and their peers, you know what? I'm not going to be excluded because I got here the same way the governor did. I didn't go to all 87 counties, perhaps, as a senator or a legislator, certainly not. But, and yeah, he's the executive guy. But the legislature ought to command their own. And I don't care what party you're in or how long you've been there or, how smart you are or you're not. But, Ms. Hortman doesn't get to decide for everybody in that room.
Well, and see,
Paul Gazelka shouldn't be deciding for everybody in that room.
And it's all part of how the function of government works, is that you can't have one person or one branch deciding that the other one's irrelevant and that we're going to replace it with somebody else who's the decision maker.
Well,
and we see that.
I'd add one word to your comment. You say how government works. I'd say good government, because you don't get good government unless you've got this robust involvement. And certainly, how can you get away from involving the elected officials? I mean, I don't get that. They've always tried to keep the public at a distance. We all get that, because those of us that are in the public. But, to not include in these discussions the chairman of various committees, as they did not. And I'm talking about on the Democrat and the Republican side, okay, Senate and House. They were excluded. They all got treated the same lousy way.
Because we want to get things done and have really short meetings. And we don't really want to have a lot of dialogue. But getting back to the Ramsey County Board, because there are some other things to cover here.
Yes.
Now, of course, being the only person in the room that was attending this meeting, you got a whole whopping 3 minutes to give your comments to the board, which of course they politely listened to. But let's take a look at our next clip as we listen to some of those comments.
Good morning,
Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. Greg Copeland. I live at 612 Cook Avenue East in St. Paul, just off Payne Avenue. We're here for 2 reasons: because we have a county charter. We're the only county charter in Minnesota. And because the folks that drafted that charter didn't put a formula in the county charter which would act as a prescriptive, if you will, or a issue where you wouldn't have to vote on your salary every year. And of course, the current charter says that you do, and you have to get it done before July. So I get why we're here, but I wish that you would ask your charter commissioners to consider, and I know this has been there before over the years, this meeting has been somewhat more popular at times in terms of people coming up to speak. But in any event, my concern on a couple of levels is that using the 2.5% is somewhat misleading, because people think, well, everybody's getting the same raise. Well, on a percentage basis they are, but we all know percentages work depending on the base. And so the nurse that works for you folks, who starts out making about $65K, is getting a $1,625 raise. The tax clerk is getting $38,000 and change, and she's getting a raise of $951. So let's think about what the commissioners are going to get. You guys are already making $94,734, all of you except for the chairman, of course, and that changes. But next year, you guys want $97,102. You want a raise, therefore, of $2,368. I thought this might have been part of your staff report, but here we are. And that's going to cost the taxpayers $14,208 plus the Social Security match, and of course, it's going to cost you a share of the Social Security. What is that, 12.4%? So that's the good news. We only get to pay half of that charge. From a perspective of a lot of your constituents who get Social Security, as I do, this raise, is actually less than the Social Security bump last year of 2.8%. But let us not be deceived. The median income, and I'm sure it's not the median income for Social Security recipients, but is about $57,717 according to your website. So you're about 40% better off with your current pay, or your proposed pay that you want for next year, than the residents that you're representing. 40%, more or less. That's a good bit of money. So what I would say too, and in our county we have 11% living in poverty, and in St. Paul, where I live, it's like more than that.
You've reached your 3 minutes.
So they wanted to make sure that they told you that your 3 minutes were up. Now, here's the thing that I want to bring out, is that while you had mentioned that the charter requires that they look at this ordinance every year, the charter does not require that they take an increase every year, correct?
Point well made. Exactly right. It doesn't require them to do anything other than act if they intend to raise their pay. If they don't do anything, it stays the way it is. And in fact, for a long period of time, I think I'm going back to the 90s, there was a long stretch where they didn't raise the pay, and that became the excuse for a gigantic pay raise. I mean, we're talking Hennepin County proportions of raise, because those guys over there, believe me, they don't go for that underpayment program. And every day is payday down at the county, So honestly, you're right. They could have done nothing. They could have said, you know what, $94,734 is enough. And I did make one, watching this, I gave you the total dollars that it's going to cost for the raises of the commissioners, but the chair makes $100,138 under the new formula that could be approved at their next meeting. And that, taken together with the other 6 commissioners, would bring it up to $16,050. But again, the good news is that we're only paying half of that 12.4%. If I could, So
Well, see, they're trying to keep pace with the city manager of Maplewood, who just got her big pay increase. So I think she's making over $135,000 now. So you see, they're feeling like they're running behind. So they got to try to catch up to Maplewood at least, don't you think?
Well, Maplewood is the largest municipality in the county, except for St. Paul, in the suburban portion. So
right now, and you made another good point as well, is that that if you were to take a look at the median income of the Social Security recipients, it probably is less than that $57,000. So I think that's a valid point to be made. And there are certainly, like say, if you're looking at Maplewood and Roseville and North St. Paul, they have statistically been increasing in their senior citizen demographics. And so they have a population that is graying, and so that is an impact certainly on the municipality, looking at who they're collecting revenues from. But since they're all in Ramsey County, those seniors are also paying those county property taxes.
And believe me, we won't cover it today, I don't think, but whenever I'm at an event with lots of seniors and we're talking about some financial issue, seniors know where they're spending every dime. Whether they get a pension and Social Security, or they just have Social Security, or perhaps they're still working at a part-time job, or most of your seniors, they know. And when they hear county commissioners talking about, they couldn't hear them talking about it because they didn't. You're right. They didn't even disclose on their agenda. They didn't disclose except if they'd read the ordinance or if you'd gone to the website. I mean, you have to do all this labor to find out what your government's doing. I wonder why they're hiding that.
Yes, right,
But,
exactly.
So here we are, and frankly, I think seniors and young families can be the salvation because young families know all the things that they can't buy because of the money that they don't have. And so, between the young people and the older people, I think if they ever got together, they'd send them a little message downtown that, we really don't need that high pay down there for you folks. We kind of need a little bit of the relief out in the neighborhoods, as opposed to you packing it in.
Right. Now, when they continue with their Ramsey County Board meeting, this meeting is only like about, 45 minutes in length. It's not even an hour, I don't think. As they continue with their meeting, let's take a look at our next clip, number 3.
Hey, I didn't get credit for the
I'm
staff
going to give you
report.
30 seconds.
Okay,
here to
thank you,
wrap
man.
up, all right?
Thank you. You're a good man. I think when we're looking at the raise that you're getting, which is about $197.33 a month, versus what people on Social Security may get in 2020, goodness knows, the economy's doing so well. Maybe there won't be, 2% inflation this year, so they won't get much more. But I think, regardless of what level the people are at, the employees' wage increases earned by your line staff, those folks are not really getting a big bang there, I would say. I mean, even when I was over Maplewood, we did 3% for the employees as a city manager.
I just gave you 10%
all right,
extra on your
and I
time
love
here.
you for it, and I thank you. And I hope you do take my suggestion because it's meant in all, good cheer.
Ed, thank you for
on
being
the
here.
charter.
Appreciate your time and effort for coming down. Anybody else here to speak on the proposed 2020 Commissioner Salary Ordinance? Anyone else here to speak on the 2020 proposed Commissioner Salary Ordinance? Last call. Anybody else here to speak on the proposed 2020 Salary Ordinance? With that, I declare the public hearing closed, and next week we'll have before us the final approval.
There you go. That's the conclusion to the big whoop-de-doo over their salary increases. No fanfare, they just want to sweep it under the carpet. So if this is a big issue that they want to sweep under the carpet, what kind of stuff do they spend their time on? Well, let's go to our next clip and see what the next agenda item is on their for their meeting.
All right, next up, we have our administrative items, and Commissioner Mattis Castile.
Yes, I'd like to move, I'll hold on administrative item number 7, but move items number 8 and 9.
You're pulling
Pulling.
7?
Pulling 7.
Yes. Sorry, I said
We have a motion for 8 and 9 with a second from Commissioner Reinhardt. Roll call, please.
Mattis Castillo.
yes.
McGuire.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Carter.
Yes.
McDonough.
Yeah.
They have just voted on items number 8 and 9. What are items 8 and 9? We don't have a clue. So if you were watching this meeting, you just saw them pass these items, ayes all, no discussion. How did they decide on their ayes all? Well, we're looking at these administrative items and, I'm just really trying to figure it out myself, what items they might have been, because here's the agenda. and trying to follow the agenda along with the meeting, it's very difficult. And I used to, as a mayor of a city, have to go through an agenda and keep order on a meeting, and I'm looking at this agenda and I can't follow along what's going on. But here's the deal, is that if you're watching, you don't know what 8 and 9 was, but you do know that they pulled 7 off of the agenda. So it must be something very important that they need to have weighty discussions about. So let's take a look at our next clip to see what our weighty discussion is going to be about finally.
Item number 7 is a grant award for Family Homelessness Prevention and Assistance Program. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
We got a motion?
And a second.
And a second. Commissioner Mattis Castillo.
Yes, I just wanted to pull this item to give us an opportunity to talk about the great work that the county is doing and moving very quickly to address our homelessness, and really just wanted to thank staff, Tina Curry and Paul Allwood, who really put in a lot of work, and all the other folks that really put in extensive work to make sure that we're moving quickly to help prevent family homelessness and address our homelessness problem. So thank you very much for your hard work and quick reaction in a pretty short timeline.
Good. Good news stuff here. Any other comments? Roll call.
Mattis Castillo?
Yes.
McGuire?
Aye.
Ortega?
Aye.
Reinhardt?
Aye.
Carter?
Yes.
McDonough?
Aye.
So exactly what work did the county commissioners do with getting this grant? So you see, this was just a PR stunt to really make it look like they're doing something for the homeless, because they went and they got a grant. Somebody on their staff went and got a grant. Well, that's wonderful that they went and they got a grant. Yeah, that's great. But really, this is just a PR stunt to make it look like they are compassionate and caring, and look at all the wonderful things they're doing after just giving themselves these big pay raises. Oh, yay. Now we support and we voted on a grant that's going to help the homeless. No wonder we should get that extra pay raise. Yay.
Well, yes, well, Diana, you have to be worthy of the rather large paycheck, I have to say, $97,102. And of course, remember that nobody drags anybody into the offices of Ramsey County elections and makes them run for public office. People do this for a number of reasons. Now, I'd like to see more people getting involved in government because they think they want to give back to their community. It's called public service. It's not because it pays almost $100,000. And when you think about this over time, these people are going to get a retirement check. And, some of those people have been there over 20 years.
Right.
And now they haven't made 100 all the time, but they've been paid above market, if you will, in my opinion. And it's just an opinion, and I like everybody else in town, have one. But honestly, and would there be more commitment to the work if the money didn't attract people in that sense? And I'm not saying we should cut people down to nothing. I mean, I have run for school board several times, and they only pay $10,000, but that's what that is in St. Paul. But seriously, all the other things that people do to volunteer at the county, they have numerous boards. The Ramsey County Charter Commission, for example, they only meet once in a while, but those people don't get paid to be on that. And there's a ton of advisory commissions and whatnot, and they're always appointing people to these things. And there are opportunities to get engaged in areas where you have a professional background or some interest because maybe you had a family experience that you had to use the mental health system and you didn't like how it worked, and so you want to get in there and make it better. There's all that kind of stuff that happens. But, just to chase paychecks down there, because, there ought to be a little compassion for the work. And I certainly don't fault any of them individually in that regard. But, if it's every year we're going to just pay ourselves more because that's what we do with our employees, I don't know. Are you an employee? Are you a leader? The employees
that is a distinction, because the county commissioners, they're not employees. They
for sure.
actually have people on staff who are the employees who do the work. The county commissioners are just the elected people who create policy. They don't really do the day-to-day work. And so that is a very important distinction. And perhaps they should be looking at it more from that perspective. Like you said, it's more of a service to the community type of perspective. They're policymakers that are elected by the people. They are not employees who are doing the 9 to 5 day-to-day work. That's a little bit of a distinction there. And something else that I wanted to bring up is that in this agenda, while it does take up, 2 full pages here, there's really not any content at all. Because after our last clip, then basically they have what's called the County Connections, and they hear from their new county manager, who gives some updates on what he's been doing and some things, and then they talk to some other people on staff about a couple of things that are just fluff things, and then all of the commissioners then give a little update or report on what they've been doing. Now, one of the commissioners, I believe, had gone on the little tour that you were on, having to do with the Rush Line, the Purple Line, whichever you want to call it. And I believe that I recall that at the meeting, as part of the report, they said that they received thank you cards from people saying what a nice tour it was, that they received thank you cards about this. So, Mr. Copeland, tell us who was on the tour. I mean, this tour, first of all, approximately when did it happen? And then about how many people were there?
Yeah, it was a Thursday afternoon. Honestly, I'm trying to remember the date. It was, I don't know, been busy here, Diana, but about 2 weeks ago, I'm guessing by now. And before this meeting took place that we just reported on. And of 7 commissioners, we did manage to be accompanied on the bus by Victoria Reinhardt, and we were headed up to White Bear, which is her district. And then Mr. Trolley Cars, I affectionately call Rafael Ortega. He won't mind, because he and I have a lot of fun with these transit projects over the years. He raises the taxes and he chases the money, and he does a pretty good job at that, raising the taxes and chasing the money that you're paying for all these things. And this was it. Just 2 commissioners out of the 7 made it, and we can go from there. But and there were all these wonderful folks that are working for the rail authority, working for their transit goals. They're consultants that are hired by these authorities, then the county, folks from Public Works, and then you had the Met Council had some people there. The commissioner aides were there. The bus wasn't full, but it was one of these very long articulated buses. It must have been brand new. It was a beautiful bus. It wasn't the electric. They were saving that for the Sea Line. I went on that trip too on Saturday. We can talk about that if you want. The people they also had on there, some business folks. They had representatives of Region Hospital. They had a representative of St. John's. They had the mayors of White Bear Lake, of Maplewood. They had 2 legislators, I believe, Sandy Pappas and, I'm trying to remember the other one. Well, and they had a representative from Betty McCollum's office, and Senator Sandy Pappas, I should say. And let's see, who else was there? And then there was me, who I enjoyed sitting all the way in the back. I usually love to sit in the front, but on these bus tours, I find you get to see what's going on. You sit in the back, and I'm in a straight line to where the fellow with the microphone, who was leading the trip, their lead staff person, and then his assistant. The 2 of them did, I think, a good job of certainly taking the tour, although at one point he was trying to pronounce, I won't call him out on the word exactly, but he obviously hadn't said that word in public before, because everybody realized that he hadn't been to the location that he was talking about, because he got the pronunciation right, which is easy to do. We've all made that error. But when you're doing a bus trip, you want to have it come off right when you got all these important people.
So I'm listening to that list of attendees, and it
Yes.
sounds like they were all individuals that are all highly vested in this project.
Oh, that's right. And they had all these people that are on the advisory committees. I think they've got 2 or 3 at least advisory committees. And I don't know how many of those folks were there, but there were a bunch of other people like, as you say, who were supporters. And, nobody sent me an invitation, and so I didn't send them back a thank you note. I did enjoy the trip. They had some cookies from a local bakery. They gave us water. They had a nice little notebook with the story about the corridor, and they had there was a couple of little treats in a little canvas bag that was nice. So it was almost as good as going on a golf tour. Oh, I don't play golf. I'm kidding. But
So
no,
it sounds like it was a very nice outing.
it was.
For all of the people that are tied into this project as a way to really bolster their support, their enthusiasm, so that they will continue to go out there to be ambassadors in the community for this project,
Yeah,
this bus rapid transit.
You know-
Now, our viewers may say, well, now exactly where is this route again?
Yeah.
Well, let's take a look at our next clip number 6.
So the corridor itself, generally, it leaves downtown St. Paul, Union Depot. For those of you who are familiar with the Gold Line project, 2 of those stations, the Union Depot and the 5th and 6th, would be shared with the Gold Line project, so an opportunity for that project to build stations that this project serves. Travels up along Robert Street, connecting what is essentially a medical corridor with Regents Hospital and Gillette, and then a connection to the Green Line near the Capitol, and then follows Phelan Boulevard, additional clinics that are there by Health Partners as well, and then through the east side along Phelan Boulevard, and then up along, which would essentially be the shared corridor with the Bruce Ventle Trail, and up through Maplewood. Stops would be at Larpenteur. The stop is right at the border with St. Paul. The Gladstone area, near Frost Avenue, the Highway 36 station, and then 2 in the North End area, which is pretty exciting. One at the St. John's Hospital, and the other at the existing Maplewood Mall Transit Center. And then to the north of there, this is where the corridor would traverse over 694 and follows Highway 61. And you get dedicated lanes by using the outside lanes on 61, with an ultimate endpoint in downtown White Bear Lake.
Now, when you look at that route, they call it a medical corridor. And it is really only a medical corridor when you're in St. Paul, correct?
Well, I'm not even going to give them that much because, frankly, I was on a district council in my area, and they being Health Partners, when they were building the new neurology clinic. This is the 3rd of their 3 clinics that they have on Phelan Boulevard, right by the interstate. And so they wanted some permission from us to get the city to agree to let them put up a sign on their construction site announcing the new center. Well, all of us in the neighborhood are certainly supportive of any investments coming to our community. So we said yes. And I took the occasion to ask a question of the 2 executives from Health Partners: where's your bus stop? Got very quiet. They had no bus stop. They were planning on building a 3rd ramp. And of course, I got to tell folks that may not be familiar with the area, this is Phelan Corridor, right where they added the new exit off of 35 when they built the Min-Pass lanes going up to White Bear Lake. And it's also right next to then the Metro Transit bus garage. It literally backs up to the back door of that building. And yet you can't take a bus to the facility. There's a 71 that goes down a little further, 1 bus. But, frankly, that bus doesn't interconnect all that well, candidly. And, the main line through the east side is 64. The 64 goes right over Phelan Corridor. That's as close as you get. I mean, so really, they are not treating their staff well. They got 3,000, I think they were talking about employees, ultimately at these locations. So why aren't they making an accommodation? I bet a lot of employees would rather leave the driving to Metro Transit on a winter day when there's snow and ice and everything else out there than taking their own vehicles.
So in other words, what you're saying is that they've given it the label of a medical corridor, and yet, if you actually look at where the stops are for this bus rapid transit,
Well, no, I'm saying where the bus is stopping right now, because what's the commitment of the bus company? What's the commitment of the medical corridor, doctors, clinics, all the rest? It's nothing. If you ride the 71, then you can take the bus there, and you're a privileged person.
right?
If you're not on that,
okay, so in other words, you're saying that if they don't have that commitment now with regular buses, how are they going to have that commitment with the bus rapid transit?
you're reading me 100%, Diana. Exactly.
I see. Well, if they invest more money into it, then they'll be able to have the commitment, right? Isn't that the way it works?
I hear this all the time, right? If we could only spend more money, right, then we're going to have this, we're going to have that. Well, you know what? I'll tell you, if I can take a second, just to compare to the Sea Line. All right, this is running from the Brooklyn Park area down to downtown Minneapolis. They opened it up last Saturday. They're using the same kind of buses that they have on the A line that's been operating for a couple of years now on Snelling, going from 46th Street, Minneapolis, all the way up to the Roseville Shopping Center. And that's been a huge success for Metro Transit. They love that. The people who ride it love it. It's a limited stop bus. It has designated stops, and you buy your ticket at a kiosk if you don't already have a pass card, gold card. Before you get on the bus. So there's no transactions on the bus. You get on, the driver doesn't know whether you've, made your payment or you haven't, but there's plenty of times I've been on that and the cops are there and they're checking. So in any event, it works. And you know what? It works over on the Sea Line. The entire route that I rode on, and I didn't get to Brooklyn Park. I got up to Penn Avenue and what was the cross street? Lowry. Okay, they had one of their setups there, a party from the neighborhood, and lots of various activities that people could partake in, and there was a free Good Humor ice cream, I must say, and I was told about that, and I made my way over there to get my orange, icicle there, and it was darn good. Reminded me of my youth. And the guy told me, he says, the cart came from New Jersey. And he goes all around the state. He lives in St. Paul, the ice cream man, and he does these kind of events. All right, that's a little extra. But the reality is, they didn't have to build any new roads. They didn't have to spend any money except for shelters and buses and some signs. Okay. And a few other things like that.
Well,
but no concrete, Brianna. They
Right.
want to spend $400 million to tear down those trees over there and build concrete.
That's right, on the Bruce Vento Trail and
Bingo.
all the trees that will be destroyed in
Yeah.
order to clear that all out, and then put all this impervious surface that they all cry about how it's so bad for the environment.
Yeah.
Now we want to show our next clip, number 7, that talks a little bit more about this purple line.
So how does Rush Line fit into the overall system? It's a question we often get asked. This is a recent graphic from Metro Transit showing that with the addition of, on the right here is Rush Line in the upper right-hand corner, and then even Gold Line is significant as well on this map. These are really the two high-frequency transit lines that are planned for this area of the region. So not just about connecting the jobs in this corridor, but it starts to open up jobs and employment throughout the market, and also starts to open up connections that other people from other areas of the corridor can make to get into the northeast market. And from a transit perspective, it's these frequent all-day services. So Rush Line would be all day throughout the day, every 10 to 15 minutes. It's that frequent all-day service that is generating the highest demand from the market, from transit users out there, and expected to be the highest area of growth into the future.
Now, the statistics that he's talking about, he makes them sound like they all apply to the Rush Line. However, we've reported and we know from the North End Work Group in Maplewood, who is studying what is going on in the Maplewood Mall area, St. John's Hospital has indicated that they have no real plans for growth or expansion. They certainly are going to continue their operations pretty much as is. So when he says that this is going to connect them for increased employment and jobs, well, maybe down in the St. Paul end, but it isn't in the Maplewood end. Maplewood is just a pass-through, and there aren't going to be clinics and hospitals sprouting up along the line, because in Maplewood, the route is going through people's backyards. And so this whole statement about jobs and employment opening up is really a false promise. And it is false advertising. Now, we have a council member on the Maplewood City Council that is very opposed to false advertising. And she believes that if you leave signage on your vacant building, that is akin to false advertising. And yet it doesn't bother her that they call the Rush Line or the Purple Line a medical corridor, which also seems to be false advertising.
Some of the numbers that they came up with, they were talking about 7,000 jobs in Maplewood between the hospitals, the clinics, and the mall. Well, I don't know. They better check those numbers, because there's a big store over there that went away called Sears.
And see, but there could be that number of jobs, except that they do not know where those people live. And I have asked their consultant, Ramsey County's consultant, where do the people live who have those jobs? And his answer to me is that they have no statistical data, they have no real data, but they do have anecdotal data that somebody told them where these people live, and that some of them live in White Bear Lake. Well, imagine that. But you see, that's why there's a lot of false information here, that when they've decided to do what they did, rather than going on 61, which is a commercial corridor, that is where they could have gone just as easily. And that brings it back to what you're talking about with the C line, that again, you could just go along the shoulders, and that is what eventually they're going to do. Once they leave Maplewood, they're going to go back out to 61, and they're going to do exactly that.
Well, and back to, you mentioned White Bear Township, Berkeley Road. There's no hospital up there. There's no clinic. There's an industrial park, if you will, light industrial, I would say, warehouses, some service businesses. There's the bakery, and he particularly mentioned that the bakery, they had trouble getting their people there. Well, that's a problem that maybe they ought to address now, because people need transportation today.
Right.
And there's a road that can get people there. So, if that's the problem up there on Berkeley Road, why aren't they doing something to address that at Met Transit? I mean, honest to God, now that we have a new leader at Metro Transit, Nora Slawick, who is pushing this heavy cost, why doesn't she solve that problem? Because guess what? They say there's 3,000 jobs on Berkeley Road. You know what? I see a lot of empty buildings out there. If anybody can take a ride, you can see all the signs, for sale, for lease, whatever.
Right. And you had mentioned how right now today they could serve the medical facilities in St. Paul by routing the buses correctly. There is a theory of intentional neglect in government circles, where they intentionally neglect their duties so that when they come up with their big project to address the neglect they created, then everybody will be so thankful that now they have this wonderful, big, bright, shiny project completed. And you see, this to me sounds like perhaps they're using that technique to then bolster the community's support for the BRT, to say, oh, it's such a wonderful project now that it's done, because now we actually have bus service when they could have had that all along.
Bingo.
So thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And viewers, thank you. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
And then you look at buildings that aren't there businesses aren't there anymore, and they're lit up, and people are looking at these wondering, are they there or aren't they? And it's particularly troublesome to, I've had people say to me, well, why is that Toys R Us sign still up there? That store's been gone for, it's up by the mall, it's off of 694, blah, 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 blah. That's where the false advertising piece comes from. And as far as I know,